my family is very rooted in the northeastern United States. And my work in ministry in recent years has, well, I guess it's the sixth school year I've been here now, has been at Cornell University, which is an Ivy League school. So I guess I've just put kind of a lot of thought into our country and the institutions that form our country, and some of the consequences of the falling apart of just the institutions that our culture in the United States was really, established on. And so that would include certainly educational institutions, but also churches as well. And I've done a lot of thinking on the role of the church in public life, and conservatism broadly. Now, when I say that, I guess I should be clear what I mean by that, because when I use the term conservatism, it probably brings certain things to mind politically. What I'm really talking about there is just the preservation of that which has been inherited. And I tend to think if you look at changes throughout culture, this is true in the church, but in the culture more broadly as well, uh, that when things are new, they tend not to have lasting power. And when things are just kind of come in out of nowhere, they can make radical changes, but those radical changes are not really going to have roots. So part of the issue in our culture today is that there is this kind of revolutionary spirit, and maybe it's because I work, largely with college students and have in ministry, is, you see these kind of far left progressive movements that really want to overthrow basically, Western culture and act like we can kind of tear down these evil institutions and bring up new ones or something, and they're going to fix all of our problems. Now, of course, that never works. If you look at revolutionary movements, you look at the French Revolution, or you look at the Bolshevik Revolution, and they they didn't last, but they also caused lots of death and lots of bloodshed, lots of harm. So I generally tend to be of the mindset that older institutions and ones that are established, that have been established for a significant period of time, are the ones that are going to have the most lasting cultural change.
Okay.
Right. So
So why should Christians care about institutions, really? Because I know that a lot of conservative Christians have this anti-institutional mindset where what really matters is just converting individuals, our individual personal faith, our personal relationship with God. So some people think institutions are like things of this world that are passing away. So for Christians, what's the value in these cultural institutions like churches or universities or even other secular forms of institutions?
yeah, sure. That's a good question. And it's simply because God has placed us in this world, and we should care about the world that God has put us in. And I think the kind of escapist attitude that basically says, well, as long as I'm saved, and as long as I have my, family is saved, and people personally believe the gospel, who cares about what happens in the culture? That is not a loving mindset, right? We are called to love our neighbor, and that means we have to love the place where our neighbor is, and that means that we should love the place that we have been given, whatever place you are in, whatever community that you're in. If all that God cared about was, your personal salvation, and didn't really care about any impact that you have on the world at all, basically convert, and you know it would be over right there, right? God would take you right into heaven. You get baptized, you're zoomed up, and then you're done, right? So
Individual
that's
rapture.
basically, yeah, you're raptured, exactly. So, but God doesn't do that. So if He's left you here, He's left you here for a reason, and He wants you to serve the best you can. Now, that should mean that we should care about our neighbors, and we tend to think of people in this kind of a very much a post-enlightenment context, very much the influence of liberalism, that we tend to think of the neighbor just as the individual person. So we think of everything. So we think about salvation. That's how we think about how we treat others. That's how we think about culture. Is everything is just individuals, and this kind of rough collection of individuals. And that's what's led to, say, government. You have this with like kind of social contract theory, at least. And there are different forms of social contract theory, but a lot of our modern political thought is based on this idea that we are these kind of atomized individuals at heart. Now, that's simply not a biblical way to think about who we are as human beings. Now, what I'm not talking about is some kind of, you know, bland, communitarianism where there is no individual identity at all. I'm not talking about a kind of communist approach that doesn't see value in individuals. I mean, obviously, yeah, as Christians, we believe that individuals are in the imago Dei, and they are valuable because God has created them. So individuals matter, and it's not like the impulse toward caring for individuals is always bad, but the kind of hyper individualism that forms the way we think about the world, I think, is a damaging one. It has caused us to think of neighbor only in terms of individuals, not in terms of things that are actually going to benefit others. And the reality is, if I want the best for my neighbor, and I want the best for my neighbor more than just one neighbor, I'm going to want them to have the best environment that's going to cause them to thrive the most. And the best way to do that is to have a culture that is positive, and a culture that is promoting that which is good. And well, how do we do that? Well, through institutions. And so ultimately, to care about institutions is simply to say that I care about my neighbor.